At a recent press conference, Mayor Daley said he's proposing to City Council that city hiring compliance responsibilities be transferred to the Inspector General's office from the city's Office of Compliance. Here are highlights of the February 8th news conference.
With me this afternoon is Joe Ferguson, our Inspector General. It is important for all of us that people and the taxpayers of Chicago know that we are making government more transparent and more accountable to them, and that when there is misconduct, it will be punished. Towards these goals, I've implemented fundamental reforms. We made real progress. Among many reforms, we prohibit pay-to-pay politics. I signed an executive order in 2005 which prohibits any person or business that does business with the city from contributing to my political campaign. We have instituted a code of conduct for all city employees that outlines key rules, policies, and ordinances that set a higher standard of conduct. I've issued an executive order that prohibits political consideration in hiring for Chapman-covered positions, require employees to fully cooperate with federal hiring monitor, cooperate with and report corrupt or criminal activity to the Inspector General, prohibit retaliation against any employee for cooperating with the Inspector General and federal hiring monitor. Still, the challenge of reforming government is tough and ongoing. We acknowledge that our efforts to reform the oversight of hiring have not yet worked as well as we like. The truth is that while I believe that the Office of Compliance model for hiring oversight was a good one, it did not yield the results we hoped for. In my view, when we set up the Office of Compliance, we added a layer of checks and balances to the system, not seen in other cities and states across the nation, which is true. Still, I'm determined to have a hiring system that works, is accountable to all the taxpayers. They're getting the best, most qualified employees, and taxpayers are getting their money's worth. I want an oversight system that continues to discipline or penalize those who are engaged in conduct. As mayor, if something isn't working as well as you want to do it, you must make the changes that are needed, which is really important. With that in mind, today I'm announcing that we'll move the city's hiring compliance, monitoring, and investigative function to the Office of Inspector General, and will, in several other important ways, strengthen the Inspector General's role and expand its responsibilities. To help ensure that hiring at the City of Chicago is open, fair, and accountable, we will submit legislation to the City Council on Wednesday, making the Inspector General's office responsible for conducting and hiring oversight and investigations. In addition, the broad legislative proposals will address a wide range of challenges. In addition to moving responsibility for oversight to the Inspector General's office, our ordinances greatly enhances the transparency of investigation results and responses by requiring the Inspector General to regularly post online all investigations where there is a finding of misconduct. This includes the nature of the complaint, the findings, the recommendations for discipline, and the city's response for recommendations. Further, to demand the highest standard of conduct, the ordinance requires every city employee, contractor, or others to promptly report to the Inspector General any information regarding corrupt or criminal activity in dealing with the city. A knowing failure to report shall be grounds for termination from employment or contractual services or other appropriate penalties. It also requires the department heads to respond to the Inspector General within 31 days with a description of any disciplinary action taken when there is a finding of misconduct. Both these provisions put into law obligations already established by the executive order. We think it should go into the law. In addition, to ensure the Inspector General's office has the resources to do their job, I've asked that the hiring oversight function now provided to the Office of Compliance be transferred to the Office of Inspector General. And going forward, we have agreed to continue to effectively fund the Inspector General's office, which is the key, making sure they have appropriations that are necessary. To further our transparency efforts, the proposal transfers from compliance to the Inspector General the responsibility for issuing and positioning online all reports required by the hiring plan, including quarterly or annual reports. Reports must also include a description of the outcomes, finding, and recommendation, actions taken by the city in response to these recommendations. And finally, in the spirit of accountability and transparency, it will allows for the prospective investigation of the conduct of City Council members and their staff. That means conduct that takes place after the effective date of the ordinance. Past misconduct can be examined only in the course of an investigation that the initiated regarding conduct that occurred after the effective date. That doesn't mean if someone complains to the Inspector General, he has a legal responsibility to deal with that complaint with appropriately state or federal authorities, even today. A new referral of information regarding misconduct that occurred prior to the effective date may be referred to the City Council on committees, rules, and ethics for the committee to conduct an investigation, which other legislative bodies have that. But more of a criminal investigation is completely different. A more complete and detailed explanation of these proposals is reflected in the press release. We believe that these are good, responsible steps that taxpayers will appreciate, potential employees will see as fair. We want every Chicagoan to have the same chance of getting a job. City government, we want misconduct to be dealt with. These steps I've already announced today address these goals, but it most importantly enhances the transparency and accountability of the ordinances. We encourage the City Council to approve these ordinances. Make sure you review it and approve it. Thank you. Joe. Joe. Excuse me.
Good afternoon. The proposal announced by the Mayor here today to amend the Inspector General's ordinance constitutes a watershed moment in the history of the city. The Mayor's proposal comes to grips with core structural reforms necessary to root out patronage and corruption in the City of Chicago. The Mayor's proposal has the support of the Inspector General's office. The Inspector General's office regards today's proposal as directly responsive to many of the core reform issues that this office has pushed in its recent public filings and further pushed in constructive dialogue between the Inspector General's office, the Mayor, and the Law Department. As proposed, the ordinance would bring monitoring oversight to the city's hiring practices to the Inspector General. In doing so, the Mayor has taken what this office has long regarded to be a critical step to structurally assuring robust and substantial satisfaction of the city's constitutional obligation as enshrined under the Shackman Accords to refrain from and stamp out influence of patronage in its employment actions. Equally important, the proposed ordinance would expand the jurisdiction of the Inspector General's investigatory powers to the City Council. Both of these structural changes have long been regarded by the IGO as necessary to rooting out misconduct in all areas of city government, to giving the citizens of this city confidence that actions taken by the city will be done the right way, for the right reasons, and with transparency. The proposal is also something this office has long believed is simply the right thing to do.